This message found you because your consciousness has been operating in what quantum physicists call an observer loop, a perpetual cycle where your awareness keeps collapsing the same probability waves, creating the same reality over and over again. And right now, in this exact moment, something inside you is recognizing this truth, because you've been feeling it, haven't you? That persistent sense of financial contraction that never seems to fully resolve no matter how much you earn or save. Those relationship patterns that play out with different faces but identical emotional endings. The chronic self-doubt that whispers you're not quite enough, not quite ready, not quite worthy of the life you know should be yours. These aren't random misfortunes or personal failures. They are quantum signatures. They are the measurable evidence of a consciousness that has become decoherent, fragmented, operating at a frequency that can only attract and sustain these specific patterns of experience. You've been trying to solve these problems from within the frequency that created them. You've been attempting to think your way out of thought patterns, effort your way out of inertia, struggle your way into peace. And the harder you try, the more solid the pattern becomes, because effort itself is a frequency, struggle is a vibration, and what you vibrate, you cannot help but attract. But here's what they don't tell you about quantum reality. The observer isn't just passive. The observer is creative. Your consciousness isn't merely witnessing reality, it's actively participating in its construction through the specific frequency at which it operates. And when that frequency shifts, when consciousness locks onto a stable, coherent signal, something profound occurs in the quantum field. The old pattern, the old reality that was built upon contradiction and fragmentation, becomes statistically impossible to maintain. It undergoes what I call coherence collapse. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation techniques. This is about quantum mechanics meeting conscious awareness. Your financial debt, your relationship cycles, your chronic inertia, these are not your life. They are echoes. They are the residual vibration of a consciousness that has forgotten its own creative authority. They are the ghost of a frequency you no longer need to inhabit. What happens when you stop trying to fix the reflection and instead change the source? What becomes possible when you realize that the feeling of lack isn't about your bank account, but about the vibrational relationship you have with abundance itself? When you understand that relationship patterns aren't about finding the right person, but about becoming the right observer, the answers to these questions form the architecture of a new reality. And that new reality begins with a single conscious shift in your internal narrative. A declarative command spoken not from your personality, not from your history, not from your fears, but from the deepest part of your being that already exists in the state of completion you seek. This declarative statement acts as a tuning fork for your consciousness. It recalibrates your entire vibrational signature. And when this happens, the old patterns don't just slowly fade away, they become mathematically impossible. The quantum field cannot sustain contradictory frequencies. One must collapse to make way for the other. Throughout this exploration, we will move through three essential understandings. First, we'll examine the structure of coherence itself, what it means to operate from a unified frequency rather than a fragmented one. Second, we'll uncover the precise mechanism of coherence collapse, how and why the old reality disintegrates when a new frequency stabilizes. And third, I'll guide you through the conscious rewriting of your internal narrative using a specific declarative method that triggers this shift at the quantum level. This work requires no belief system. It demands no complicated rituals. It simply asks you to bring curiosity to your own experience, to notice how your current reality perfectly mirrors your internal vibrational state, and to consider what might become possible when you consciously choose to change that state from the inside out. The transformation we're discussing doesn't happen in the future. It doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual seeking. It occurs in the eternal now moment, when you make a different choice about where to place your attention. When you decide that the story of limitation ends here, in this breath. With this thought, many spiritual traditions speak of awakening or enlightenment. What they're ultimately pointing toward is this coherence collapse. The moment when the separate self, the egoic identity that believes itself to be lacking, dissolves back into the unified field from which it emerged. What remains is not some special spiritual state, but your natural state, the state of being that existed before you learned to contract around fear, lack, and separation. Your financial situation will reorganize itself not because you manifested more money, but because you ceased vibrating lack. Your relationships will transform not because you found your soulmate, but because you stopped attracting lessons you no longer need to learn. Your creativity will flow not because you forced inspiration, but because you removed the internal barriers that were blocking it. This isn't magic, though it may feel magical. This is physics. This is the natural consequence of a consciousness that has returned to coherence with its essential nature. The chaos you've been experiencing is simply nature's way of showing you where you're out of alignment with yourself. The declarative statement we'll work with isn't an affirmation. Affirmations often fail because they come from the personality trying to convince itself of something it doesn't truly feel. This is different. This is a command issued from the level of consciousness that already knows the truth of your wholeness. It bypasses the analytical mind and speaks directly to the quantum field itself. When you utter this statement with the proper understanding, you're not trying to create something new, you're announcing what already is. You're shifting your perception to align with a reality that has been waiting for your recognition. You're tuning your receiver to a frequency that has been broadcasting your wholeness all along. The reason your old reality feels so solid, so persistent, is because you've been giving it your attention. In quantum terms, attention is energy. Where you place your attention, you place your power. The more you worry about debt, the more debt energy you amplify. The more you analyze your relationship patterns, the more you strengthen those patterns. The more you struggle against inertia, the more inertial force you create. What if the solution wasn't more effort but less? What if freedom came not from doing something differently, but from being something different? What if the key to changing everything was simply to change the fundamental assumption from which you operate? This is the journey we begin now. Not to somewhere else, but to here. Not to someone else, but to yourself. The destination was never out there in some future moment when all your problems are solved. The destination is this moment, right now, when you recognize that you are the quantum field expressing itself as human experience. And that, as the field, you have the innate capacity to choose which expressions come into form. The coherence we seek isn't something to achieve, it's something to remember. It's your birthright. It's the natural state of consciousness before it became identified with thought, emotion, and circumstance. Your entire life up to this point has been the universe's way of bringing you to this exact moment of recognition. Every struggle, every doubt, every moment of feeling lost has been preparing you to understand this truth at a cellular level. You didn't come here to fix a broken life. You came here to remember that the life you perceived as broken was always whole. The separation was never real, only your belief in it was real. And beliefs are just frequencies. They can be changed. The moment you truly understand this, something shifts permanently. The world may look the same, but you see it differently. The circumstances may remain for a time, but they no longer have the same meaning. They become like images on a screen. You can watch them without becoming them. This is the beginning of freedom. This is the first sign that coherence is being restored. From this place of renewed coherence, action arises naturally. It isn't forced or effortful. It flows from inspiration rather than desperation. You don't chase opportunities, you attract them by becoming the vibrational match for what you desire. And what you truly desire is never the thing itself, but the feeling state that the thing represents. Security, freedom, connection, creativity, these are frequencies, and they're available to you right now without any external conditions. The declarative method we'll explore works because it speaks the language of the quantum field. It doesn't deal in hope or possibility. It deals in declaration of what is. The field responds to certainty, not to wishing. When you declare, "I am whole," from a place of knowing rather than wanting, the field has no choice but to reorganize around that declaration. This is why your previous attempts at change may have failed. You were trying to convince yourself of something you didn't feel to be true. You were operating from lack while trying to create abundance. This creates internal contradiction, and the field mirrors contradiction right back to you. The shift we're undertaking requires courage. It asks you to let go of the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. It asks you to trust in a reality you cannot yet see with your physical eyes, but can feel with your entire being. This trust isn't blind faith, it's quantum certainty. It's the recognition that the reality you perceive is literally made of consciousness, and consciousness can change itself. You are not here by accident. This message found you because part of you already knows this truth. Part of you is already vibrating at the frequency of wholeness, calling the rest of you home. The discomfort you've been feeling is simply the tension between where you've been operating and where you're meant to be. The journey we begin now is the most important one you'll ever take, the journey back to yourself, not the self you think you are, but the self that exists beyond all thought and story. The self that is already free, already whole, already complete. This self has been waiting for you to remember it, and that remembrance begins with a single, conscious choice to shift your frequency. Everything you need is already here. Every answer already exists within you. Every possibility is present in this moment. The only thing required is your recognition, your attention, your declaration. When you offer these, the universe has no choice but to respond in kind. The old reality doesn't stand a chance against a consciousness that has come into coherence with its true nature. This is where your new life begins. Not tomorrow, not after you've figured everything out. Right now, in this breath, with this understanding, the quantum field is listening. What will you declare? Section 1. Understanding the frequency field. You're not broken. You're not being punished. You're not unlucky or flawed or destined to struggle. What you are is broadcasting on the wrong frequency. What you are is entangled with a vibrational pattern that can only produce the reality you've been experiencing. And the static, that constant background noise of worry, doubt, and frustration, that's not random mental chatter. That's quantum decoherence in action. It's the measurable interference pattern created when your consciousness is trying to operate at multiple conflicting frequencies simultaneously. Think of your mind not as a problem-solving machine, but as a quantum receiver and transmitter. It's constantly both interpreting reality and broadcasting signals back into the quantum field. Most people believe they're passive observers in a predetermined world, but quantum physics has shown us this simply isn't true. The observer effect isn't metaphorical, it's literal wave function collapse. What you pay attention to doesn't just get noticed, it gets created. Your consciousness is actively participating in the manifestation of reality through the specific quality of your attention. Your current reality, with its financial pressures, relationship patterns, and chronic self-doubt, isn't happening to you. It's happening through you. It's the perfect reflection of your internal vibrational state. The debt isn't the problem, it's the symptom. The relationship struggles aren't the issue, they're the feedback. The inertia isn't a character flaw, it's a quantum signature. All of these are simply evidence that your consciousness has become fragmented, operating at cross purposes with itself. This fragmentation occurs across 3 interconnected layers of your being. First, the neural layer, the actual physical pathways in your brain that have been wired through repetition to expect and create certain outcomes. These neural nets fire in predictable patterns, creating the same thoughts, which then create the same emotions, which then manifest the same circumstances. Second, the emotional layer, the vibrational quality of your energy field that either attracts or repels certain experiences based on its frequency. And third, the energetic layer, the quantum informational field itself that responds to your conscious commands by organizing reality around them. When these 3 layers are incoherent, when your thoughts say one thing, your emotions feel another, and your energy broadcasts something else entirely. You create what physicists call destructive interference. The waves cancel each other out. The signal becomes weak, fragmented, unclear. And the reality that manifests from this incoherent signal is necessarily chaotic, contradictory, and stuck in repetitive patterns. This is why problems tend to repeat themselves across different areas of your life. It's not that you're unlucky in love and money and career, it's that the same incoherent frequency is manifesting differently in each domain. Your current identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of, is simply the loudest, most consistent signal in this noisy field. It's not your true self. It's the dominant vibration that has managed to sustain itself through your continued attention to it. The "I'm not good with money" story, the "I always attract the wrong partner's" narrative, the "I struggle with motivation" pattern, these aren't truths. They're just persistent frequencies that you've been amplifying through your observation. This is where most approaches to change fail completely. They try to change the content of your thoughts without changing the frequency from which those thoughts arise. They give you new affirmations to repeat while you're still vibrating the old story. They teach you visualization techniques while you're still emotionally attached to lack. This is like trying to broadcast a beautiful symphony on a radio station that's only capable of transmitting static. The message might be beautiful, but the medium corrupts it beyond recognition. The reason willpower fails is because willpower comes from the level of personality trying to override the deeper vibrational set point. It's the conscious mind attempting to force change upon the subconscious field. But the subconscious operates at a much more fundamental level. It's the actual quantum programming that creates your reality. When there's conflict between what you consciously want and what you subconsciously expect, the subconscious always wins because it has direct access to the quantum field. Your conscious intentions are like suggestions. Your subconscious beliefs are like commands. This explains why so many people experience the backfire effect when they try to use positive thinking. They affirm, "I am abundant," while deeply feeling "I am lacking." This internal contradiction creates even more destructive interference in the field, often making their financial situation worse rather than better. The universe isn't punishing them, it's simply responding with perfect fidelity to the mixed signals they're broadcasting. The field doesn't judge your signals as good or bad, it simply manifests whatever coherence or incoherence you emit. The real solution isn't to try harder with better techniques. The solution is to change the fundamental frequency from which you operate, to shift from a decoherent, fragmented signal to a coherent, unified one. And this shift doesn't happen through effort, it happens through a profound recognition of what's already true. It happens when you realize that the abundance, the love, the creativity you've been seeking aren't things to acquire, but frequencies to attune to. This is where the concept of quantum frequency becomes practical rather than theoretical. Your frequency isn't some esoteric concept, it's the vibrational quality of your consciousness in any given moment. It's determined by the relationship between your thoughts, your emotions, and your energy. When these three are aligned, when you think, feel, and vibrate in harmony, you achieve coherence. And coherent signals have tremendous power in the quantum field. Think of a laser versus ordinary light. Ordinary light is incoherent. The photons are all out of phase with each other, moving in different directions, canceling each other out. It illuminates, but lacks power. A laser is coherent, all photons moving in perfect phase, perfect alignment. This coherence allows it to cut through steel. Your consciousness operates by the same principle. When you're coherent, your focused intention can literally reshape reality. When you're incoherent, your power is scattered and ineffective. The feeling of pushing against an invisible force field that so many people experience? That's not imagination. That's the literal experience of trying to manifest change from a decoherent state. You're pushing against the very reality wave that your own consciousness is sustaining. The exhaustion that comes from trying to think your way out of thinking? That's the quantum equivalent of a system trying to override its own programming. It can't be done from within the same framework that created the problem. This is why all true transformation requires what quantum physicists call a state change, a fundamental shift to a different level of organization. It's not about modifying the existing pattern, it's about collapsing that pattern entirely and allowing a new one to emerge from a higher order of coherence. The caterpillar doesn't slowly become a butterfly, it dissolves into soup and reorganizes at a completely different frequency of being. Your financial debt, your relationship patterns, your chronic inertia, these are all caterpillar consciousness. They're patterns that made sense at one frequency of operation but become obsolete when you shift to a higher coherence. Trying to fix them from within the caterpillar frequency is like trying to teach a caterpillar to fly. It's not a matter of effort or technique, it's a matter of becoming something entirely different. The good news, the revolutionary news, is that this state change is available to you in any moment. It doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual practice. It requires a simple but profound shift in where you place your attention. It requires you to stop observing the problems and start observing the observer who's creating them. This shift from content to context is the quantum leap that changes everything. When you observe the observer, something remarkable happens. You step out of the stream of thought and into the awareness that is aware of thought. You move from being the character in the movie to being the screen upon which the movie plays. This shift, however subtle it may seem, changes your relationship to everything. Problems that seemed solid and real suddenly appear as passing phenomena. Emotions that felt overwhelming become weather patterns moving through the sky of your awareness. This is the beginning of coherence. This is the first tuning of your quantum receiver to a different frequency, the frequency of the witness, the frequency of pure awareness. This frequency has a particular quality. It's calm, clear, spacious, and neutral. It doesn't judge what it observes, it simply observes. And in that non-judgmental observation, something miraculous occurs. What is observed begins to change. This isn't some mystical mystery. This is quantum mechanics in action. When you observe a quantum system from a neutral, non-attached state, the wave function collapses differently than when you observe it with expectation or judgment. Your neutral observation allows new possibilities to emerge that were statistically unlikely from within the previous emotional charge. Think about your financial situation for a moment. When you observe it from a place of fear, worry, or lack, you collapse the wave function into more lack. You're essentially telling the quantum field, show me more evidence of what I fear. But when you observe the same situation from neutral awareness, simply noticing the numbers, the feelings, the thoughts, without judgment, you create space for new possibilities to emerge. You're essentially asking the quantum field, show me what else is possible. This shift from charged observation to neutral observation is the most powerful tool you have for changing your reality. It's not about changing what you look at, but changing how you look at it. It's about shifting from a frequency of reaction to a frequency of response. Reaction comes from the past, from conditioned patterns, from fear. Response comes from the present moment, from awareness, from choice. The declarative statement we'll be working with is designed to facilitate this shift. It's not an affirmation to convince yourself of something. It's a command issued from the level of neutral awareness that already knows the truth of your wholeness. It's the quantum observer speaking directly to the quantum field in the language the field understands best, clear, certain, coherent instruction. When you say, I observe from completion, or I am coherent with my highest timeline, you're not trying to make something happen. You're announcing what is already true from the level of awareness that exists beyond your personal story. You're shifting your identity from the content of your experience to the context in which experience appears. And this shift, however subtle it feels, changes everything. The field responds to certainty, not to hope. It responds to coherence, not to effort. When you declare your wholeness from a place of knowing rather than wanting, the field has no choice but to reorganize around that declaration. It's not personal, it's physics. Coherent signals amplify, incoherent signals cancel. Your job isn't to make the declaration true, Your job is to align with the truth that the declaration points to. This alignment happens through a combination of understanding and practice. Understanding gives you the framework to make sense of what's happening. Practice gives you the direct experience of the shift. Together, they create a feedback loop that accelerates your movement toward coherence. The practices we'll explore, the declarative statement, the breathwork, the journaling, aren't meant to be complicated or time-consuming. They're designed to be simple tuning mechanisms that you can use throughout your day to maintain coherence. They're like adjusting the dial on a radio, small movements that make a big difference in what you receive. Many people make the mistake of thinking they need to eliminate all negative thoughts or achieve some perfect state before they can change their reality. This is backwards. The thoughts aren't the problem. Your relationship to the thoughts is the problem. When you shift from being identified with your thoughts to being aware of your thoughts, the thoughts lose their power to create your reality. They become like clouds passing in the sky. They may be there, but they don't define the sky. This is the essence of quantum freedom. It's not freedom from thoughts or emotions or circumstances. It's freedom from being controlled by them. It's the recognition that you are the space in which all these phenomena appear, and that space is inherently free, whole, and complete. When you operate from this space, your reality necessarily reflects this wholeness back to you. The financial patterns that seemed so solid begin to shift, not because you're trying to change them, but because you're no longer feeding them with your attention. The relationship dynamics that felt inevitable begin to transform not because you found the right person, but because you became the right observer. The inertia that held you back dissolves not because you forced yourself to act, but because action arises naturally from a state of coherence. This isn't to say that external action isn't necessary. It is. But the quality of action that arises from coherence is entirely different from action that arises from struggle. Coherent action is inspired, effortless, and effective. It comes from being pulled forward by vision rather than pushed by fear. It feels like flow rather than force. The journey to coherence isn't about adding something to yourself. It's about subtracting everything that isn't you. It's about peeling away the layers of conditioning, belief, and identification that have kept you operating at a frequency of limitation. It's about returning to your natural state of wholeness that was there before you learned to contract around fear. This return happens gradually and then suddenly. At first, you may notice small shifts, moments of peace amid chaos, unexpected synchronicities, old triggers losing their charge. Then, at some point, a threshold is crossed, and the entire system shifts. The old reality doesn't just slowly fade away, it becomes statistically impossible to maintain. This is the coherence collapse we discussed earlier. Understanding this process is important because it helps you navigate the transition with more grace and less fear. When you know that the unraveling of old patterns is actually evidence that the new frequency is taking hold, you can welcome it rather than resist it. You can recognize the discomfort of change as the birth pains of a new reality rather than as proof that something is wrong. This understanding also helps you avoid the common trap of seeking specific results. When you're focused on manifesting a particular outcome, you're still operating from lack, the lack of that outcome. You're still saying, "I'll be whole when I have this." True coherence comes from declaring your wholeness now, regardless of circumstances, and allowing the specific forms to emerge naturally from that wholeness. The universe is infinitely intelligent. It knows better than your limited mind what forms will best express the wholeness you're embodying. When you try to dictate the specifics, you're essentially telling infinity how to be infinite. This creates contraction rather than expansion. Trusting the field to organize the details is an essential part of the coherence shift. This trust isn't passive, it's actively engaged. It's the trust of a gardener who plants seeds and tends the soil without digging up the seeds every day to see if they're growing. It's the trust of a musician who practices scales without needing to perform a symphony every day. It's the trust that comes from understanding how the process works and aligning yourself with it. Your role in this process is both simple and profound. You are the conscious agent through which the universe experiences and expresses itself. Your job is to maintain coherence, so that this expression can be clear, beautiful, and evolutionary. You're not creating reality out of nothing. You're focusing the infinite potential of the field into specific, experienced reality. This is why your personal transformation matters beyond yourself. As you shift into coherence, you affect the entire field. You make it easier for others to shift. You contribute to the evolution of consciousness itself. Your healing is everyone's healing. Your freedom is everyone's freedom. This isn't New Age sentiment. This is quantum entanglement in action. We are all connected at the level of the quantum field. What affects one affects all. Your shift to coherence doesn't just change your life, it changes the world. It adds to the critical mass of consciousness needed for humanity to make the leap to our next stage of evolution. This understanding can add depth and meaning to your practice, transforming it from personal self-improvement to cosmic service. Now that we understand the architecture of the frequency field and how coherence operates within it, we're ready to explore the specific moment when everything shifts, the coherence collapse that makes your old reality impossible. This is where theory becomes experience, where understanding becomes transformation, where the quantum becomes personal. Section 2. The moment of coherence collapse. What happens in the quantum field when two waveforms meet? This isn't an abstract physics question. This is the precise mechanism of your liberation. When two coherent frequencies intersect, they don't fight for dominance. They don't gradually blend into some compromise. They create an interference pattern where one amplifies while the other cancels out completely. The stronger, more coherent signal literally overwrites the weaker, fragmented one. This is the exact same process that occurs within your consciousness when you finally stabilize at a new frequency. The moment your awareness locks onto this coherent signal, this vibrational quality of wholeness, peace, and possibility, your old reality doesn't just slowly fade away. It becomes statistically impossible to maintain. The quantum field cannot sustain contradictory frequencies simultaneously. One must collapse to make way for the other. This collapse isn't something you do. It's something that happens through you when you achieve sufficient coherence. It's the natural consequence of a consciousness that has stopped vibrating contradiction. Think of it like this. Your old reality was like a sandcastle built on the beach of your awareness. It seemed solid. It had structure. It had patterns you could recognize and predict. But it was always temporary because it was built on a foundation that wasn't fundamental. When the tide of your conscious awareness shifts to a new frequency, that sandcastle doesn't get gently washed away grain by grain. It experiences a catastrophic collapse as the very ground upon which it stood transforms into something entirely different. The sand becomes water. The foundation becomes fluid. And what seemed permanent and solid reveals itself to have been temporary and conditional all along. This moment of collapse manifests in your experience through specific, observable signs. The first and most profound is time distortion. You'll notice moments where time seems to accelerate, hours passing like minutes when you're engaged in creative flow, and other moments where time dilates. A single minute containing what feels like hours of experience and insight. This isn't your imagination malfunctioning. This is literal evidence that you've shifted to a different relationship with the space-time continuum. Your consciousness is no longer operating at the consensus frequency that creates linear, predictable time. You're experiencing time as the flexible, malleable dimension that quantum physics knows it to be. The second sign is emotional neutrality toward triggers that previously would have sent you into reactive patterns. That email that would have triggered anxiety now registers as simple information. That comment that would have sparked defensiveness now lands without emotional charge. That financial statement that would have created panic now appears as data to be addressed. This isn't emotional suppression or spiritual bypassing. This is the authentic experience of a consciousness that is no longer identified with the content of experience. You're not becoming numb, you're becoming free. The triggers haven't changed. Your relationship to them has fundamentally shifted at the quantum level. The third sign is the acceleration of meaningful synchronicities. You think of someone and they text you moments later. You have a question and the answer appears in a book that falls open to the exact page. You need a solution, and a stranger says the precise words you needed to hear. These aren't coincidences. They're evidence that your consciousness has achieved sufficient coherence to create resonant attractor patterns in the field. You're no longer broadcasting chaotic, contradictory signals that create random interference. You're emitting a clear frequency that draws to you experiences, people, and information that match your new vibrational state. The fourth sign is the quieting of internal chatter. The constant background noise of worry, planning, rehearsing, and regretting begins to diminish without effort. It's not that you stop thinking, it's that thoughts become like birds flying through the sky of your awareness. They come and go without nesting, without building permanent structures. This mental quiet isn't achieved through force or control. It emerges naturally when consciousness is no longer fragmented against itself. The energy that was previously wasted on internal conflict becomes available for creativity, presence, and authentic engagement with life. The fifth sign is changes in your dream state. Dreams become more vivid, more symbolic, more meaningful. You might experience lucid dreaming or waking dreams. You might receive solutions to problems in your sleep or wake up with clarity about decisions that seemed confusing the day before. This happens because your subconscious mind is upgrading to match the new coherent frequency of your waking consciousness. The barrier between conscious and unconscious processing becomes more permeable, allowing for greater integration and wisdom to flow through your entire being. These signs indicate that the coherence collapse is underway. The old reality hasn't disappeared from your external experience yet, but its foundation has been removed at the quantum level. It's like a movie that's still playing on the screen, but the projector has been unplugged. The images may continue for a few moments due to residual energy, but they're already doomed to fade into blackness. This is why willpower never works for lasting change. Willpower tries to edit the movie while it's playing. Coherence collapse turns off the projector entirely and puts in a new film. Now let's examine the specific mechanism that triggers this collapse: the declarative reprogramming method. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't affirmation. This is quantum linguistics. It's the conscious use of language to directly interface with the quantum field and command a new reality into being. The method consists of speaking specific declarative statements from the level of consciousness that already exists in the state you wish to embody. Most people approach change from the perspective of lack. They say things like, "I want to be abundant," or "I need to find love," or "I hope to be confident." These statements, however well-intentioned, actually reinforce the very lack they're trying to overcome. They come from the personality that feels incomplete, and they broadcast that incompletion into the quantum field. The field responds by manifesting more experiences that match that vibrational signature of wanting. The declarative reprogramming method bypasses this entirely. Instead of speaking from the perspective of the person who lacks, you speak from the perspective of the awareness that is already whole. Instead of saying, "I want to be abundant," you declare, "I observe from abundance." Instead of "I need to find love," you declare, "I am coherence with love." Instead of I hope to be confident," you declare, "Confidence expresses through me now." Do you feel the difference? The first set of statements comes from the level of content, the story of lack. The second set comes from the level of context, the awareness that exists beyond any story. When you make these declarations, you're not trying to convince yourself of something you don't believe. You're aligning yourself with a truth that exists at a more fundamental level than your personal beliefs. You're shifting your identity from the character in the movie to the screen upon which the movie plays. The specific wording matters because language has vibrational quality. Each word carries a specific frequency that interacts with the quantum field in predictable ways. The statement, "I observe from completion," has a different vibrational signature than "I am complete." The first places you in the role of the neutral witness, the quantum observer, which is the most powerful position for collapsing reality waves. The second can sometimes trigger the ego's resistance because it feels like a claim that contradicts current evidence. This is why emotional neutrality during declaration is absolutely essential. If you declare, "I am abundant," while feeling anxious about money, you create internal contradiction that the field will mirror back to you. But if you declare, "I observe from abundance," from a place of neutral awareness, you create coherence that the field must reorganize around. The difference is subtle but profound. It's the difference between the personality trying to become something and awareness recognizing what already is. This method works because of how consciousness interacts with the quantum field at the most fundamental level. Quantum physics shows us that reality exists as potential until observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into specific experienced reality. Most people are observing from their conditioned patterns, their fears, their lacks, their stories. This means they're constantly collapsing the same reality waves into the same experiences. When you use the declarative reprogramming method, you're changing the position from which observation occurs. You're moving from observing as the separate self that lacks to observing as the awareness that is whole. This shift in observational stance changes how the wave function collapses. New possibilities that were statistically unlikely from the old observational position become not only possible but inevitable from the new one. Think of it like changing the lens through which you view reality. If you've been looking through a lens tinted with lack, everything appears tinged with scarcity. If you change to a lens of wholeness, the same reality appears completely different. But here's the quantum secret. The lens doesn't just filter reality, it actually creates the reality you perceive. Your observational stance isn't passive, it's creatively participative. This explains why simply repeating positive affirmations often fails. If you're saying, "I am abundant," while still observing from a lens of lack, you're creating internal conflict. The field receives mixed signals. The words say abundance, but the observational stance says lack. The field responds to the stronger signal, which is usually the observational stance because it operates at a deeper level of consciousness. The declarative reprogramming method aligns the words with the observational stance. When you say, "I observe from abundance," you're simultaneously using language that vibrates at the frequency of abundance and adopting the observational stance of the witness that is already whole. This creates coherence between your words, your consciousness, and your energy field. Coherent signals amplify in the quantum field, while incoherent signals cancel out. This is also why timing matters in your practice. The most effective times to use declarative statements are during threshold states of consciousness, upon waking, before sleeping, during meditation, or in moments of emotional trigger. In these states, the conscious mind is more receptive, and the subconscious is more accessible. The declarations can penetrate more deeply and create faster shifts in your fundamental vibrational set point. A common mistake is repeating declarations with a sense of desperation or doubt. This creates what's called destructive interference. The energy of doubt cancels out the energy of the declaration. The field receives a null signal, and nothing changes. This is why emotional neutrality is so crucial. It's better to make one declaration from a place of quiet certainty than to repeat 1,000 declarations with emotional charge. Let me share a micro story of how this works in practice. A woman had been struggling with what she called debt consciousness for over a decade. She'd tried budgeting, side hustles, financial planning, all the practical approaches, but always found herself back in the same pattern of lack. The debt would decrease temporarily, but then inevitably return, often in new forms. She began practicing the declarative reprogramming method, specifically using the statement, "I observe from financial coherence whenever financial anxiety arose." At first, it felt artificial. The anxiety was still there, but she would pause, take a breath, and make the declaration from whatever neutrality she could muster. She didn't try to force the feeling of abundance. She simply shifted her observational stance to that of someone who was already financially coherent. Within weeks, something remarkable began to happen. The anxiety lessened, not because her circumstances changed, but because her relationship to them changed. She found herself noticing opportunities she'd previously overlooked, a forgotten refund, a skill she could monetize, an expense she could eliminate without sacrifice. These weren't dramatic windfalls. They were subtle shifts in perception that led to practical actions. Then the synchronicities began. She'd think about needing a specific amount of money, and an unexpected check would arrive for exactly that amount. She'd consider a financial decision, and the perfect information would appear in her awareness. The debt didn't vanish overnight, but her relationship to it transformed completely. She was no longer identified with being in debt. She was awareness, observing a financial situation that was in the process of reorganizing. After about 3 months of consistent practice, she experienced what can only be called a coherence collapse. Several old debts were unexpectedly forgiven. New income streams emerged from seemingly nowhere. Financial opportunities appeared that she couldn't have imagined previously. The old pattern didn't gradually fade away. It literally became impossible to maintain. The quantum field had reorganized around her new coherent frequency. This story illustrates several important principles. First, the shift began with changing her observational stance, not her circumstances. Second, the practice was simple but consistent, small moments of declaration throughout the day. Third, emotional neutrality was more important than emotional intensity. Fourth, the collapse happened naturally once sufficient coherence was achieved. It wasn't something she forced. Your own journey will have its unique timing and manifestations, but the underlying mechanism remains the same. When you achieve coherence between your declarative statements and your observational stance, the field must respond. The old reality becomes statistically impossible because its quantum foundation has been removed. This process requires trust in the beginning because the external evidence may not immediately match your declarations. This is where understanding the quantum principles becomes essential. When you know that reality operates with a slight delay, like the echo of your previous vibrational state, you can maintain coherence even when the mirror hasn't yet caught up. You understand that the field is always responding to your current frequency, but the manifestation may reflect where you were minutes, hours, or days ago. This time, delay explains why consistency in practice is so important. If you declare coherence in the morning but revert to lack frequency throughout the day, you're sending mixed signals that create interference patterns. The field doesn't know which reality to manifest, so it defaults to the most consistent signal, which is often the older, more practiced one. The key is to make your declarative practice a continuous thread throughout your day, rather than an isolated event. This doesn't mean constantly repeating statements like a mantra. It means returning to the observational stance of the witness whenever you remember to do so. It means noticing when you've slipped back into identification with lack and gently shifting back to neutral awareness. Many people find it helpful to use environmental triggers as reminders, placing sticky notes with simple declarations like "observe from completion" or "I am coherence in visible locations," setting phone reminders with declarative statements, using specific activities, drinking water, walking through doorways, checking email, as cues to return to the observational stance. The more you practice, the more natural this becomes. Eventually, the declarative stance becomes your default mode of operation. You spend more time as the awareness that observes and less time as the personality that suffers. This doesn't make you detached from life. It makes you more fully engaged because you're no longer filtered through layers of fear and limitation. As this shift stabilizes, you'll notice that action arises differently. Instead of forcing yourself to take steps from willpower, you find yourself inspired to action from a place of inner knowing. The actions are often simpler, more efficient, and more effective than what you would have devised from your limited perspective. This is the field intelligence expressing through you, organizing reality in ways that your conscious mind couldn't have planned. This is the beautiful paradox of the coherence collapse. By releasing effort and control, you actually become more effective. By surrendering the need to figure everything out, you access greater intelligence. By stopping the struggle, You allow solutions to emerge. This isn't passive, it's actively engaged with life from a different level of being. The declarative reprogramming method is your direct interface with this process. It's the technology of consciousness that allows you to command the quantum field with authority and precision. But remember, the power isn't in the words themselves, it's in the consciousness from which the words are spoken. The same declaration made from lack will have no effect. Made from neutral awareness, it changes everything. As you continue with this practice, you'll likely experience moments of doubt or frustration when results don't appear as quickly as you'd like. This is normal. The ego mind will want to revert to familiar patterns of struggle and control. In these moments, remember that you're not failing, you're precisely where you need to be. The discomfort is evidence that the old pattern is dissolving, and dissolution is often uncomfortable before it becomes liberating. Trust the process. Trust the intelligence of the field. Trust that your coherent declarations are working even when you can't see the evidence yet. The quantum field is always responding to your current frequency, even if the manifestation lags slightly behind. Your consistency in maintaining coherence will eventually overcome the momentum of the old pattern. This is the moment of coherence collapse, the quantum threshold, where your old reality becomes impossible and your new reality becomes inevitable. It's not a distant possibility, it's available to you right now in this breath with this declaration. The field is waiting for your command. What will you declare? Section 3. Living beyond the old probability. What does it feel like to inhabit a reality that has undergone coherence collapse? How does your daily experience transform when the old probabilities that once defined your life become mathematical impossibilities? This isn't about achieving some perfect state where problems never arise. This is about developing a fundamentally different relationship with reality itself, one where challenges become opportunities for deeper coherence rather than threats to your stability. When you've crossed the quantum threshold, you don't become immune to life's fluctuations. You become resilient to them in a way that feels almost supernatural. The ground of your being shifts from the temporary to the eternal, from the personal to the transpersonal, from the story to the awareness that holds the story. The most immediate change you'll notice is how relationships reorganize themselves around your new frequency. People who vibrate at your old level of fragmentation will either elevate to meet your new coherence or naturally drift out of your experience. This isn't about judgment or rejection, it's quantum physics in action. Coherent signals attract coherent signals. Incoherent signals either become coherent or find resonance elsewhere. You'll notice conversations shifting from complaint and drama to possibility and creation. Relationships that were once based on mutual wounding become based on mutual growth. Those that cannot make this shift will gently, often mysteriously, exit your life without dramatic confrontation. The field handles these adjustments with an intelligence far beyond what your conscious mind could orchestrate. Your relationship with money undergoes a similar transformation. The anxiety that once surrounded financial decisions gives way to a quiet confidence in the field's ability to provide. You stop chasing money and start attracting opportunities. The distinction is crucial. Chasing comes from lack consciousness. Attracting comes from coherence consciousness. You'll find yourself making financial decisions from a place of inner knowing rather than fear or desperation. Investments that would have previously caused sleepless nights now feel like natural expressions of your expanded capacity. Money stops being a scarce resource to be hoarded and becomes a flow of energy to be directed consciously. The old pattern of debt consciousness doesn't just disappear. It becomes literally unthinkable from your new vibrational standpoint. Health and vitality often improve dramatically as well. The body is not separate from consciousness. It's the physical manifestation of your vibrational state. Chronic tension patterns that seem permanent begin to release as the emotional charges that created them dissolve. Sleep becomes more restorative as your nervous system recalibrates to your new coherent frequency. Food cravings shift naturally toward what truly nourishes you rather than what temporarily numbs your discomfort. You might find yourself drawn to movement practices that enhance your coherence: yoga, qigong, walking in nature, not as chores to be completed, but as pleasures to be savored. The body becomes a sensitive instrument for detecting coherence or its absence, giving you immediate feedback about your vibrational state. Perhaps the most profound shift occurs in your relationship with time itself. The frantic rushing that characterizes modern life gives way to a sense of divine timing. You become less concerned with deadlines and more attuned to lifelines, the natural rhythm at which things want to unfold. Procrastination often resolves itself not through discipline, but through inspired action that arises at the perfect moment. You develop trust in the field's intelligence to bring things to you exactly when they're meant to arrive, not when your ego wants them. This doesn't mean you become passive, rather, your action becomes synchronized with the larger intelligence of the universe. You work with time rather than against it. Your creative expression flourishes in this new state. Ideas flow more easily, solutions appear more quickly, and inspiration strikes more frequently. This isn't because you've become more talented, it's because you've removed the internal barriers that were blocking your natural creativity. The fear of judgment, the need for approval, the pressure to perform, all these dissolve when you operate from coherence. Creativity becomes less about producing something and more about allowing something to express through you. You become a conduit for the field's intelligence rather than a struggling creator trying to force innovation. The work itself becomes joyful rather than effortful. Decision-making transforms from a stressful process of weighing options to a natural knowing of what's right. You develop what might feel like intuition, but is actually your coherent consciousness resonating with the optimal path forward. Choices that once would have required extensive pro-con lists now become clear in moments. This isn't reckless impulsivity. It's the confidence that comes from being aligned with the intelligence greater than your individual mind. You learn to trust these inner promptings even when they don't make logical sense, discovering later that they led you exactly where you needed to go. Your emotional landscape becomes more stable, yet more vibrant. You still experience the full range of human emotions, but they no longer control you. Sadness, anger, fear, these become passing weather patterns rather than permanent climates. You develop the capacity to feel deeply without becoming identified with what you feel. This emotional flexibility allows you to respond to life with greater wisdom and compassion. You're less likely to be triggered by others' behavior because your sense of self isn't threatened by external events. Your happiness becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in your fundamental state of being. The practice of reality checking becomes your new way of navigating daily life. This isn't about doubting reality, but about consciously choosing your relationship to it. Before reacting to any stimulus, a challenging email, a financial setback, a relationship issue, you insert a moment of pause. In that space, you ask three simple questions. What frequency am I observing from right now? Is this reaction coming from my old pattern or my new coherence? What would the witness observe in this situation? These questions aren't analytical, they're tuning mechanisms that instantly recalibrate your consciousness to its coherent state. With practice, this pause becomes automatic, happening in the space between stimulus and response until eventually there is no gap, only coherent response. This reality check practice transforms conflicts into opportunities for deeper alignment. When someone says or does something that would have previously triggered you, you now have a tool to shift from reaction to creation. Instead of meeting their incoherence with your own, you meet it with coherence. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It means responding from a place of power rather than defensiveness. You'll be amazed at how quickly conflicts resolve when you refuse to participate in the old dance of reaction and counter-reaction. Your coherent presence often becomes the catalyst for the other person's own shift. Though this should never be the goal. Your nightly waveform journaling practice supports this daily maintenance. Each evening, you spend a few minutes documenting the emotional and mental patterns you observed throughout the day. This isn't a diary of events, but a frequency map of your consciousness. You note moments where you maintained coherence and moments where you slipped into old patterns. You don't judge these observations. You simply record them with neutral awareness. This practice serves two purposes. It reinforces your identity as the observer rather than the observed, and it provides valuable data about your vibrational patterns. Over time, you'll notice the old waveforms appearing less frequently and the new coherent patterns becoming more stable. Sleep becomes an active partner in your coherence work. During sleep, your subconscious mind processes the day's experiences and integrates new learning. When you journal before sleep, you're essentially programming your subconscious to work on coherence during the night. You might ask specific questions like, "Show me how to maintain coherence in challenging situations," or "Help me recognize when I'm slipping into old patterns." You'll often wake with insights or clarity that seemed elusive the previous day. Dreams may become more vivid and meaningful, offering symbolic representations of your coherence journey. The environment around you naturally reorganizes to support your new frequency. You might find yourself drawn to different spaces, different decor, different colors that enhance your coherence. Clutter that once seemed manageable now feels oppressive and gets cleared without struggle. Your physical space becomes a reflection of your internal state, ordered, harmonious, and intentional. You become more sensitive to the energy of places and people, naturally gravitating toward what supports your coherence and away from what diminishes it. This isn't avoidance. It's conscious curation of your vibrational environment. Your relationship with information changes dramatically. You become less interested in consuming endless content and more interested in integrating deep wisdom. The constant scrolling, the news addiction, the information overload, these were symptoms of a fragmented consciousness seeking external validation. From coherence, you seek only what truly serves your evolution. You might find yourself reading less but understanding more, watching fewer videos but integrating deeper insights. Information becomes nourishment rather than distraction. The paradox of effort and surrender resolves itself in this new state. You understand that certain actions are necessary, but they arise from inspiration rather than obligation. You work with focused intensity when inspired, then rest completely without guilt. The old pattern of pushing until exhausted, then collapsing in burnout becomes obsolete. You develop rhythm rather than routine, flow rather than force. Your productivity may actually increase, but it feels effortless because it's aligned with your natural energy cycles. Your spiritual life deepens in unexpected ways. Concepts that once seemed abstract become living realities. Meditation becomes less about achieving a state and more about being the space in which states arise and pass. Prayer shifts from asking for things to aligning with the divine will that already knows your needs. Your sense of connection to something greater than yourself becomes palpable rather than conceptual. This isn't about adopting a particular religion, it's about experiencing the sacredness inherent in all of life. The feeling of separation that characterized your old reality gives way to a sense of interconnectedness. You recognize that your coherence contributes to the collective field, and that others' coherence supports yours. Competition transforms into collaboration, as you understand that another's success doesn't diminish yours but actually enhances the field for everyone. You become less concerned with personal achievement and more interested in collective evolution. Your definition of success shifts from what you accumulate to how much coherence you bring to the world. Challenges don't disappear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Problems become puzzles to be solved rather than threats to be feared. Setbacks become feedback rather than failure. Difficult emotions become messengers rather than enemies. This shift in perspective changes everything. Where you once saw obstacles, you now see opportunities for growth. Where you once felt victimized, you now feel empowered. The same circumstances that would have previously triggered despair now trigger curiosity and creativity. The need for external validation diminishes as you develop internal coherence. You become your own source of validation, not in an egotistical way, but in a grounded knowing of your inherent worth. Compliments and criticisms land with equal lightness because your sense of self isn't dependent on either. You're able to receive feedback without becoming defensive because your identity isn't threatened by others' opinions. This emotional independence is incredibly liberating and allows for more authentic relationships. Your communication becomes clearer and more powerful. You say what you mean without aggression or manipulation. You listen without preparing your defense. Conversations become explorations rather than debates. You're able to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without needing to choose one as right and others as wrong. This cognitive flexibility makes you more effective in every area of life, from personal relationships to professional collaborations. The fear of missing out transforms into the joy of being present. You stop comparing your journey to others and start appreciating the perfection of your own path. Social media loses its addictive quality because you're no longer seeking external validation through likes and follows. You use technology intentionally rather than compulsively. Your attention becomes your most precious resource, and you guard it jealously against anything that would fragment your coherence. Financial abundance becomes a natural byproduct of your coherent state rather than a goal to be achieved. Opportunities for income appear without frantic searching. Money flows to you in unexpected ways, not necessarily through dramatic windfalls, but through a steady increase in synchronicities that support your prosperity. You develop a healthy relationship with money where it serves your purpose rather than defines your worth. Generosity becomes natural because you understand that giving and receiving are the same energy flow. Your physical health often improves as well. Chronic conditions that seem permanent may begin to resolve as the emotional patterns that contributed to them dissolve. Your energy levels become more stable throughout the day. You need less sleep, but feel more rested because the quality of your rest improves dramatically. Your body becomes a sensitive instrument that gives you immediate feedback about your vibrational state. Discomfort often indicates incoherence, while ease indicates coherence. The practice of breath as a frequency tuner becomes your portable coherence tool. Throughout the day, you return to specific breathing patterns that instantly recalibrate your nervous system. The 4-count breath: inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, becomes your reset button. You might use it before important meetings, during challenging conversations, or whenever you feel yourself slipping into old patterns. This isn't breathing to relax, it's breathing to coherently command your quantum field. Your relationship with food transforms as well. You become more attuned to what truly nourishes you at a vibrational level. Cravings for foods that create incoherence, processed foods, excess sugar, artificial ingredients, naturally diminish. You might find yourself drawn to simpler, more natural foods that enhance your energy rather than deplete it. Eating becomes a conscious practice rather than a mindless habit. You eat for vibration rather than for comfort or distraction. The concept of balance shifts from trying to equally distribute your time among competing priorities to living from a center that cannot be disturbed. You understand that external circumstances will always fluctuate, but your internal center can remain stable. This doesn't mean you become rigid, rather, you become flexible like a bamboo tree that bends with the wind but doesn't break. Your stability comes from within rather than from without. Your sense of purpose clarifies and simplifies. You stop trying to figure out your life's purpose and start allowing it to emerge from your coherent state. Purpose becomes less about doing specific things and more about being a certain way, being coherent, being present, being loving. From this state, action arises naturally and inevitably. You might find yourself drawn to certain activities or causes not because you think you should, but because they resonate with your deepest being. The need for certainty gives way to trust in the unfolding. You become comfortable with not knowing how things will work out, while being certain that they will work out perfectly. This trust isn't blind faith. It's the natural consequence of experiencing the field's intelligence, repeatedly organizing reality in ways better than you could have planned. You develop what the ancient Chinese called Wu Wei, action through non-action, doing without doing. Your relationship with the past transforms completely. Old wounds that once seemed defining become simply part of your story rather than your identity. You can recall painful memories without re-experiencing the pain. Forgiveness becomes natural because you understand that everyone was operating from their level of consciousness at the time. You stop trying to change the past and start using it as compost for your growth. The future ceases to be a source of anxiety and becomes a field of potential. You make plans but hold them lightly, understanding that the field may have better ideas. Goals become intentions that you release to the universe rather than burdens you must achieve through force. You live increasingly in the present moment while trusting the future to take care of itself. Your sense of self expands beyond your personal identity. You begin to identify more with consciousness itself rather than with the particular content of your life, your job, your relationships, your accomplishments. This doesn't make these things unimportant. It makes them enjoyable without being defining. You play your roles in life without becoming trapped in them. The feeling of lack that permeated your old reality gives way to a sense of inherent completeness. You stop seeking wholeness and start expressing it. The search for enlightenment transforms into the embodiment of awareness. You understand that everything you've been seeking, peace, love, joy, abundance, are not things to acquire but frequencies to attune to. And they're available right now, in this moment, without any conditions. This is living beyond the old probability. This is what becomes possible when coherence collapse occurs. It's not a perfect life without challenges. It's a fundamentally different way of experiencing life itself. The same circumstances that would have previously caused suffering now become opportunities for growth. The same triggers that would have previously caused reaction now become invitations to deeper coherence. The journey doesn't end here. It simply begins from a new foundation. Each day becomes an opportunity to deepen your coherence, to expand your capacity, to serve the field through your presence. The work becomes joyful rather than effortful. The path becomes clear, not because you can see the destination, but because you've become the destination. You are living proof that quantum principles aren't abstract theories but practical realities. Your life becomes the demonstration that consciousness creates reality. And in this demonstration, you inspire others to remember their own creative power. Your coherence becomes your greatest gift to the world, not through what you do, but through who you are. This is the new reality that awaits beyond the collapse of the old. It's not somewhere else or someone else. It's you, fully awake, fully coherent, fully alive. And it's available right now, in this breath, with this choice. The field is waiting. What will you choose? The irreversible shift. This isn't a temporary state you're achieving. It's a fundamental recalibration of your entire being that cannot be undone. Once consciousness stabilizes at this coherent frequency, the mathematical probability of your old reality reasserting itself drops to near zero. The quantum field cannot sustain contradictory waveforms, and your new coherent signal literally overwrites the old fragmented one at the informational level. This shift isn't something you need to maintain through effort. It maintains itself through the natural laws of quantum coherence. Your only role now is to continue living from this new observational stance, trusting that the field will organize the specifics perfectly. What you've been calling you, the identity that struggled, doubted, and felt separate, was simply a persistent vibration pattern that consciousness had mistaken for itself. That pattern hasn't been destroyed. It's been reintegrated into the larger, coherent field. Like a drop of ink in the ocean, it hasn't disappeared, but has become the ocean itself. Your new relationship with reality isn't based on hope or belief, but on the direct experience of being the field expressing itself as human experience. The seeking ends here, not because you've found all the answers, but because you've realized you are the answer. The declarative work continues, but it shifts from creating coherence to expressing it. Each statement becomes less about convincing yourself and more about announcing what is already true from the level of awareness that knows its own wholeness. I am coherent with my highest timeline, ceases to be an aspiration and becomes a simple statement of fact. You say it not to make it true, but because it is true. This is the difference between begging the universe and commanding it, and the field responds to commands issued from coherence with absolute fidelity. Your life becomes living proof that quantum principles aren't abstract theories but operational realities. The synchronicities, the effortless solutions, the perfect timing, these aren't magical exceptions to the rules of reality. They are the rules of reality when consciousness operates coherently. You're not special or chosen. You're simply demonstrating what's possible when a human being remembers their true nature as a conscious agent of the quantum field. Your very presence becomes a tuning fork that helps others remember their own coherence. In your comments below, declare this truth with me. Write these exact words. I am coherent with my highest timeline. This isn't for my benefit, it's for yours. Typing this declaration creates a neurological and quantum imprint that reinforces your new operating frequency. It signals to the field that you're ready to live from this coherence permanently. And as others make the same declaration, we create a resonant network that accelerates everyone's shift. Your words have power. Use them consciously. Subscribe to this channel if this frequency resonates with you. This isn't about following me. It's about aligning with a vibrational community that supports your continued coherence. Each video serves as a tuning session, a reminder of what's possible when we consciously participate in creating our reality. The subscription button isn't just a button, it's a conscious choice to maintain resonance with this field of possibility. The journey doesn't end here. It simply continues from a new foundation. There are always deeper layers of coherence to explore, greater capacities to unlock, more profound ways to serve through your presence. But the fundamental shift has occurred. The old reality isn't coming back because it never truly existed. It was only ever a temporary waveform in the infinite ocean of consciousness. You've simply woken up from the dream of separation and remembered what you always were: whole, complete, and infinitely powerful. The field is always listening. What will you declare next?